better start.
Yay. So fun. We waited so long to see everyone.
We're live on Facebook. Ooh, who's coming in?
We're live on Facebook, all around the world, touching the globe.
I gotta pull it up on my phone.
Sorry, it's your show, not mine.
That's all right.
No, it's your show today.
All right, I
It's
think we're ready to
your
get
show
rolling here.
today.
Hey, everybody, thank you. Welcome to another episode of TCK Live Season 6, Episode 2. We are glad to have you wherever you're joining us from around the world or watching it on the recording. We love our live attendance, and please get ready to ask your questions. I'm sure you have a lot today for Miss Kristi. Speaking of which, I am Brett Taylor with Interaction International, and I'm joined by my colleague who is still fixing her camera, apparently, Cheryl O'Brien, our TCK specialist, and of course, our favorite Disney princess. Yes, there she is.
Put the tiara in place.
It looks so lovely on you every time.
Well, thank you.
As mentioned earlier, our guest today is Kristi Steele from KC360, and she this time is going to be talking to us about majors and selecting majors in colleges, and even maybe spend a little bit of time on finances. And we'll share another special upcoming episode that we're going to have a special seminar that she's going to be doing just for you guys who join us. So looking forward to that. Hey, if this is your first time joining us, thank you. We love you guys. Enjoy your questions and your feedback, your encouragement. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, Cheryl loves to see your comments there. If you're joining us here on our Zoom, let us know where you're joining us from. Write that into the chat. Tell us where you're from. We love to see where people are joining us from all around the world today. So thank you guys for who have managed to join us today. And I think we're about ready to get going. Cheryl, do you want to finish introducing our guest here more formally and appropriately?
It would be my pleasure. Kristi is a TCK from Central America. She grew up in Panama and Nicaragua, and a little bit in Costa Rica too. So she is the princess of Central America. I'll share my crown next time we're together.
Oh, thank you.
She worked with a Christian university for several years, and her specialty was recruiting international students and TCKs. So she worked that for starting in 2015, worked into college admissions, and then in 2019, she founded KC360 and directs and helps with the college admission process for TCKs, the people we love the most. She is the virtual college counselor for so many organizations and schools. And she also, she comes and graces us with her presence. And she also hosts webinars and courses and online college fairs and all kinds of fantastic things to help with the college admission process and to help kids find the right fit for them. So, yeah, that's Kristi. We're so glad you're here, Kristi.
Thanks. It's a joy to be back.
I have a very important question for you.
Yes.
What's in your cup?
Half tea, half lemonade.
Ooh, very nice. Brett, what's in your cup?
Well, today I am drinking chai from a Keurig. Is that like wrong? But that's the best I could do on short notice.
Almost wrong. So, in my brand new praise gathering mug from Fred Bach Publishing, music publishers, I've got my iced coffee and I've got my water, because as our friend Jesse says, you gotta hydrate or dihydrate. And it looks like water wins today with our guests. 75% of them are drinking water. And let's just say cheers to a new session of TCK Live.
TCK
Cheers.
Live, episode 2 underway. Very good. Hey, as we're getting started though, if you're not familiar with Interaction or some of the things that are going on, we would love to have you join us for other episodes as well. upcoming in a couple weeks, we have a very special episode that's close to my heart. We're going to be talking about setting standards for TCK care in organizations. And there's a TCK care organization is creating standards. It's going to be fantastic. Come on November 19th. So some of the board members are sharing about those standards. November 2nd, we have educational challenges. Dr. Karen Roble is going to be talking about that. And especially in light of COVID and lockdowns and things, a lot of people are asking how we're going to get caught up on educational issues. So you can find these and more on our website. So join us live. We love to hear that. Faith on the Move is out in Spanish and soon to be Portuguese. So if you have a TCK, especially teen who has just moved and they're looking for a devotional, 30-day devotional, highly recommend this. And of course, our magazine Among Worlds, the September 22 issue is available. And it was an open theme, and we got a lot of good feedback from that one. So we even had one of our speakers from last time was a contributor to it. So if you wanted to check out that episode, that's good stuff. So Cheryl, I think we're ready to dive in. Is that right?
I am so ready to dive
All right.
right into talking to Kristi.
Into diving and talking to Kristi. Kristi, you have been doing a fantastic job. I mean, you have filled in this amazing gap in this world of helping TCKs who are living in a not just a cross-cultural environment, but usually across the ocean from where they're probably going to go to university. And you've stepped in through KC 360 to fill that gap a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about how that's been going for you. Where is that at? You've been doing it for what, 3 years, 4 years now?
Yeah, 3 years.
How's that been going so far?
I think really well. I mean, I really started it out of a heart from some things that I felt like we could do better in the college admissions process, and did not anticipate COVID being such a huge factor, but a lot of what I ended up starting with was virtual. And then of course it's just fed in really well to the environment that we've all been forced into. And even things like this has just really helped give families access. And so while I think, we're on the downside of Zoom fatigue, I do think that it's given us a great opportunity to sort of hone access for families to have information. And one of the things that I saw the most that I'm so excited about every month is just families, understanding the process of college admissions and that conversation, and then their ability to just access resources that really help them and their student through that process. And so it's been a fun year. This fall, we went on the virtual college fair tour with 8 universities and hit some countries in Central and South America. And if you're listening, we're excited that you're back. And it was really great. And now we're in the middle of the virtual college fair. And so that's accessible for anybody as well.
I do see that we have Lisa Harrell on here from Panama. So did you get a chance to see her when you're down there at all?
I did.
She's fantastic.
He says buenas tardes.
Buenas hermana.
Very good. That was your home country, so that was I know a meaningful trip for you as well. So
yes.
Well, let's dive into it a little bit more, because the agonizing question I know seniors especially get asked is, where are you going to go to college and what are you going to study? And primarily today we want to talk about how do we deal with this when students don't know, or they're trying to choose a career path and stuff. What expectations colleges have towards that. So let's kind of go there a little bit to begin with. Do TCKs, do you feel like, have a bigger challenge in choosing those career paths, or how have you seen it with some of the TCKs, missionary kids you've worked with? Is it, you find that they're struggled just as much as the monocultural peers do, or have you noticed anything different?
I think a lot of students just in general struggle with what they want to do. And, we live in this world where like there's new jobs and opportunities starting all the time. I mean, even when I was in school, I graduated in 2000 from college, and there was no like entrepreneurship major. And now, 10 years ago, there was no data analytics major. And I mean, there's just things that like you can do all the time. And I think, as a student, keeping up with that kind of thing is just really hard. And then when you're in the midst of what a lot of TCKs have experienced in the last 2 years, just massive transition and being a nomad and so much, moving around, not just mentally, but emotionally and physically, I think it does make it really hard to try to figure out what you really want to do. And, in a lot of countries, culturally, you do what your parents did or you do what they tell you to do.
That's right.
And so, you know, a lot of our TCKs, there are some families, of course, that are very opinionated about what their students should do and heavily lean in one way or the other. And that's just, you know,
Well, and in
that's,
all fairness, though, I mean, parents have a good idea of who their kids are, and
yeah,
they can best sometimes call out some of those gifts. So that's not a bad thing for
absolutely.
parents to speak into that.
Not at all. But there are kids that, you know, really truly don't,
Yeah.
they don't know what they want to do. And I mean, I've worked with my fair share of international students who, you know, they said like, my student will be a pharmacy major. They will be a pharmacy
That's
major.
right.
And, you know, they get into pharmacy school and of course they don't do well. And they're like, I'd rather do X. And then they change and they're in
Organic
school.
chemistry kills them.
Yeah, it kills everybody organically. But, you know, I think that it is a whole process for students. And while I think as Westerners, we have more flexibility in our culture for that kind of thing, it also can bring a lot of uncertainty for students. And I see that now. And a lot of students are taking gap years, which I think as a TCK is a fantastic option. And we can talk about that a little bit. But
Yeah.
I do think that a lot of students struggle. I mean, most of the students I talk to, they really don't know what they want to major in. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not born knowing what we're going to do for, you know, 30 years of our life.
Yeah. And it's not unusual for people to change. I think sometimes as parents, we get, for me, I have one that's a sophomore in college, one that's heading to college next year, and get a little, oh, we're going to potentially be putting quite a bit of money into an investment that may not be a good investment. It may feel like that at times, but anecdotally for me, I've seen TCKs just in some of their exposure is limited to job careers. I mean, I'm fortunate that our family has happened to live here in the States. And as a result, we have access to opportunities for them to expose. My son is interested in engineering, for example. And I can imagine if we lived overseas in Kenya or Thailand or some of those other places where there is some engineering opportunities there to learn and see how manufacturing plants work, it's might be a little harder to access that. And so I sometimes feel like TCKs do have a little narrower band of jobs that are might speak to their hearts a little bit.
And they definitely have fewer opportunities to like shadow or, you know, there's so many limitations about work, and shadowing isn't about being paid. But
nice,
it, you know, yeah, but I mean, you're right. Like the options there are limited. And I think sometimes families feel like, you know, if my parents are in ministry, I have to do that too. What does that mean for me? Whereas
especially missionary kids, we see that calling, you know, that struggle with calling and missions, and do I need to go back into missions? I think TCKs, I don't know what you think, Cheryl, too, about this, but, you know, TCKs just almost sometimes prefer not to live back in their passport country. And so they're thinking job opportunities. What gets me not back in my passport country?
What
Embassy
gets me
jobs. I'll be an airline pilot. I'll be whatever it can to get me going on that. So what do you think, Cheryl?
Yeah, absolutely. There are some who are like, I'm going back to America and I am staying in America. And some are like, I'm going back to my passport country, America, Canada, wherever, but get me out of there as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
I want the skills that send me, I don't have to go back to where I grew up, but I want to be somewhere else.
And that's normal, you know. I think there's a term for that when you individualization, you know, where you want to get out of wherever you are as your home base. And that's very normal. I think, yeah. And I've got a great interview with a professor from Ouachita Baptist on this, like the difference between career versus calling. And I think a lot of times when you're talking about college majors, you know, especially when your family has been in some sort of, you know, ministry type atmosphere, it's a struggle to figure out, like, is this what I want to do as a career? Is this my calling? How do I determine the difference? You know, does my career have to be my calling? Does my calling have to be my career? And those are all, I think, questions that a lot of TCKs ask, and they're super valid questions. And I think understanding and knowing yourself in that is really important. And that'll be an interview that's posted in November. So if you're part of the monthly navigator system that I have, and it's free, it's just basically a bunch of webinars and interviews that really offer insight into the college application process, but also other things like that. And understanding, I think, as a student, like what the difference is between career and calling, and how do those mix, and how do those intersect, and what do those mean for me? And Dr. Duval just gives sort of a great inventory for that kind of thing. And I think, to me, when you're looking at career paths, that's really critical, because there is a difference there, and they can intersect, and they don't have to be the same thing. And a lot of times, we're so enmeshed in everything we're doing from a spiritual ministry perspective that it's really hard to think about building a major and it not being the calling at the same time. When that's what we've lived, right? There's even a book about us, right? Like living the call, like children of the call. And that's been our mantra. That's been our life. And so I think understanding the difference in that is really important.
Yeah. How do you help then? Because I do struggle with personally as a father, and others that TCKs I've worked with, probably thousands of TCKs trying to look towards college, and they're wrestling through it. Parents don't want to waste their money, and so we talked about gap year and stuff. But sometimes the alternative is actually to help them discern or figure out some career paths for them. What do you recommend for that, or what tools are helpful in that case, Kristi?
There's sort of two ways that I approach this. And obviously every student is different, even within the same family unit, right? If you've been a parent for longer than a year, and you have multiples, every kid is different in vast ways, not just in like minuscule ways. But there's two ways. One is just really not pressuring the student to figure it out. Like, well, you just need to figure this out, like a math problem, because it's not A plus B equals C. And that figuring it out, like providing them opportunities to really, test out what they want to do. If that's shadowing, for a day, and there's a lot of opportunities to do that, even with visa and finance restrictions, right? Like most places will, if you have a relationship, which is so key in overseas countries, will allow you to do that. And I tell students, like, if you have a day, my daughter and I talked about this yesterday, if you have a day that you shadow someone, she's interested in physical therapy, and you hate it, that's great. Because sometimes it's equally as important to understand what you don't want to do than it is what you do want to do. And the same is true with internships. If you have a terrible boss, that really helps you understand what kind of boss you don't want to be. And so that's one way. It's just sort of trying out several things. And, and I will add, from a college admission perspective, it's really helpful to do that, because it shows that your willingness to just try a variety of things and put that on your application. I shadowed 5 different industries just to see which one I was interested in. And college admissions officers are fascinated by that, because they're like, what? You were willing to try all these things? That's amazing.
And while living overseas sometimes limits the opportunity to have these job shadowing opportunities, there still is possibilities. But I also think then it's more important for parents to be proactive on this when they're back at their home countries, to take advantage of, even if it's just for the summer they're back, say, hey, why don't you go, this is a person I know, a friend of mine or whatever, try these things out. And I do agree. And as doing leadership development with students, I think it's so important to try them outside of where they think their strengths are. Sometimes it's not till they've tried something. There's some kids who are super shy and they're like, oh, I could never do this. And I'm like, sorry, you're gonna have to get up in front of this big group and make an announcement. Oh, I could never do that. I could never do that. And then they get up there and, wow, that wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was. And I'm like, no, not only was it not bad, but you killed it. And, you have an undiscovered gift here. And so to your point, try a bunch of different things. And even if it seems unrelated to any interest, you never know what's going to sorry, I don't know where I'm stealing this from. Spark joy. I think it has to do with sorting clothes that my wife talks about sometimes, but spark joy. Get into it in that way. But in addition to doing career paths and stuff like that, by shadowing and learning through seeing other people, you have some other things you recommend, Kristi?
Yes. So I work with an former administrator who works with Wiley Curriculum Company, and we co-cooperate on an assessment that's called the Pathway Planner. And it's expensive. It's $300, but I will say that's infinitely more expensive than a college class, which is $300.
That's more expensive than the college class?
Hour.
I would say a lot less expensive.
Inexpensive. It's a whole lot less money than a college class. It's like the cost of 1 hour of a college class, and usually classes are 3 hours.
Yeah.
But it really does help students in several ways. One, it identifies their strengths, it identifies careers that they would have a propensity to succeed in. And then what I actually love about it is that it gives an entire database of jobs, their locations, an average salary for that time.
Nice.
And so it really helps you see a bunch of different things. And most students that take it, they come out with just a whole list of things. And what's great about it is that Jane goes through and talks with students and by themselves about it and the report. And then you talk with the parents and the student, and then the student and I and the family go back and we talk about their report in regards to majors. Like, these are great careers and this is a fabulous report, but what does that mean in terms of a major? Yeah. And how do I combine those things? And what does that look like? And then we talk about scholarships within those majors and universities that offer TCK scholarships within those universities. And so it's just a great conversation. It's, segmented, right? They take the assessment online, then they meet with Jane, then they meet with me. But it's a really fantastic way. And I've done, so many students, and I've not had a single one that was like, meh. And most students are like, meh, about a lot of things. But
true.
It's super affirming, and it really does give just good ideas. And one of the things that I feel like is its biggest strength is that it helps you get like backup ideas. Like, say, you really want to do engineering, but you have an small interest in chemical. So what if you minored in chemical, or you loved engineering, but you also love to write? So what if you did a minor in journalism, and how, that makes you even more marketable, because engineers have to write too, or journalism and, engineering and marketing, there's just, it really shows how you can sort of mix this different thing together. And probably my favorite example is a student that ended up at Hope. And if you've known me for any amount of time, this is probably one of my favorite stories. She was a biology major and loved biology, but she loved illustration and drawing. So she majored in biology, did really well in it, but also minored in illustration. Well, now she works for a biology curriculum company, drawing curriculum, like textbooks.
Nice.
And so the assessment helps identify those kinds of things of like, yes, you have this strength here, but how do you take other strengths within that and mold them together? Because if anyone had said to her, like, you're really good at biology, I mean, you're never going to make a career out of drawing, right? Because that's what most
every
of
parent
us
says, actually.
Yeah, I mean, like,
music.
you can't illustrate for the rest of your life and make money.
Oh.
Wrong, she is, and she's making money. But like, that's where that kind of assessment really comes in handy, because it just gives you a whole range of ideas of how to mix and match your major. And more than anything, I think students just feel really affirmed, like, these are amazing things that I'm created to do, and wow, I do have potential.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that. And I love the way that assessment doesn't just say, here's what we think you could do, but then that second important piece of, and because of this, and if you're excited about this, any of these catch fire for you, if this lights your passion, here's some pathways towards a major that you want to do.
That's so much better than what I took when I was in high school. It spit out this thing and it told me basically I should consider being a missionary or a forest ranger. And I was like, but what if I don't want to do either one of those things?
Yeah.
It's just,
I mean, I was a congregational studies major, because that's what you did as a woman if you were going to do anything in church life.
Well, there you
I
go.
mean, yeah, it's just, I think it's really life-saving in a lot of ways. And it really helps students understand not just their gifts and talents, but how they can position themselves in the university world.
Yeah. So university world, picking majors, colleges are asking and need you to declare your majors when you're going in. Is that the norm now, or what's the norm nowadays, Kristi? I mean, I really feel like COVID has changed a lot of expectations, even from my two kids, who one was mid-COVID and now post-COVID applications. I'm noticing differences in the applications.
In the United States and Canada, you can go into college undecided or undeclared, and you can do that, and that's not a problem.
But does that lower your chances of getting into school? Is that to a school say, this guy doesn't know what he's doing? not
No,
going to
it
give him
doesn't
any
lower your
scholarships.
chances of admission, but it does impact your scholarships because if you, for example, knew you wanted to do engineering and the school or schools of your choice had a departmental engineering scholarship, you're not going to apply for that.
Yep.
And so, it can put limits on it, but there are most schools will have upperclassmen departmental scholarships for this very reason, right? They don't want to put all their money in four-year scholarships so that students have the flexibility to change. They put them in, years 2, 3, and 4. So in the US, you can go in undeclared. When you start looking at like the United Kingdom and some other areas, you do have to declare in advance. And you basically declare on your college application, and your essay is based on sort of an argument of why you want to do that major. And so, that's what you're basically applying into that department. You're not just applying into that college, but you're applying into that department from the United Kingdom and some other UK type based, countries.
I think that's true for a lot of the technical schools too. Like my son in engineering, looking at like Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech and some of those schools, you don't just apply to the school, you actually have to get into those particular departments and things of like that. But for the schools that don't require that, or even let's say you get accepted, when's the norm to then have to declare? Do you have like one semester to work that out, or?
Usually it's one semester. You can squeak out into your second one, but by the time you're in your second semester, you should have like with your advisor, your career path plan. And I, wouldn't recommend going past a semester just because if you want to do anything like study abroad, if there's internships, if you go into any pre-professional degrees, and that's like dentistry, pre-pharm, medical, that kind of thing, then you really, you at that point, you will have added another semester on because their schedules are so tight.
I would say even that I sometimes do worry about our TCKs in this, because those who are undeclared have a little harder time because many of them have taken either IB courses or they're taking their AP classes, and they're actually moving into college sometimes with their first semester finished academically, or even sometimes the first full year. I've known more than a few who've clept out of programs and are basically coming in as a sophomore in college. And then you've got those undergrads, a lot of those credits out of the way, and now you really do need to start picking that major track to start your courses. So
absolutely,
it's a mixed bag. You can be really happy for them. They've saved you a year of school, but if they don't know what they're doing, that can
And
be.
every college has a career center. Every single college is going to have a career center that helps guide those things. It has a variety of assessments. They'll have, interview practices where you can practice an interview for a job. Every school is going to have that. But it is really helpful if going in, not just for your classes, but for scholarship. And if you have a remote idea of what you might be interested in, the best thing you can do, there's two great things, but the best thing you can do is go into that major at that university and look at their course list and go through their courses and look at the course descriptions. And if those don't excite you, just swipe right and go the other way because that's not for you. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Oh, it's good. When are examples of majors you need to apply for? When do you need to know those in advance when your application? You talked about nursing, pharmacy, pre-med. Those things are more important, more key. Is that what you're saying? Than
anything pre-professional is going to have a really tight, course schedule. And in a lot of cases, now universities, you sort of like apply for the university and then you apply for that program, and you'll know, most of them have like, especially for nursing and pre-med and like pre-pharmacy, you'll know in advance whether you're in that cohort for that program, and you travel with that cohort. Cohort's a fancy academic word for group. And you travel in that cohort, the whole time that you're in school, and it's like a mini community that you just go along with. And a lot of schools will sort of pre-position you in that regard, because the schedules are really tight, right? Like there's not a whole lot of room, and you do have some flexibility in terms of like electives, a few, but for the most part, they've got their schedule system worked out really well, and there's not a lot of room for flexibility there.
Kristi, Lisa's asking about extra not ACD, SAT subject area tests.
Yeah, some of them, there are some schools that do require, certain SAT scores, subject tests. There are some schools that actually do require certain, like if you're looking at, a certain program, like let's say nursing or pharmacy, they want to see what sciences you had, and all schools are going to see that you've had 4 sciences, 4 English, social studies, all that. But there are a handful of schools that for competitive reasons, they want to know like what kind, have you had 2 years of chemistry? Have you, that kind of thing. So that's exactly right. They have, it's sort of like a program umbrella where you apply for the university, but then you apply for those programs with their requirements, and that has their own deadline. They have their own requirements. They usually have their own application. They have their own admission committee for that program. And so, you may squeak out of like the college, without an SAT score. But if you're looking at a pre-professional program like that, then, pay attention to those requirements. Absolutely.
The other one I think is music too. A lot of times you have to go and audition for a lot of music majors. Is that correct?
Yeah. So anything arts related, like music or, illustration, sometimes even production now. It's so interesting. A lot of schools will have an arts recruiter, and you submit your portfolio of like your art or your music, your instrumentation. And a lot of that can be done remotely now because everyone's set up for that. So don't feel like if you're away from, wherever the school is, that can't happen. And the arts recruiter should work with you on your portfolio to get everything in there. And you should be able to ask them for feedback, like, is this what you're looking for? What else do I need? And if you're going to do that in advance, there's nothing wrong with your junior year, beginning of your senior year, asking, what do I need to prepare for? What do I need to add in?
Yeah. I mean, nobody was excited about COVID and the global pandemic and lockdown and stuff. But I will say for TCKs, the benefit is for college admissions process, so many more colleges started doing virtual options and trying to market themselves virtually and figuring out other pathways for doing school visits, for applications and things like that. So never wish that ever to go through that experience again. But there was some at least side benefits for the TCK world and that world.
Absolutely.
So, how do colleges determine if you're good in a particular area? And is it just some of these things? And is it that you're talking about these pre-application things can get dropped from a program once you get accepted in?
If your grades or something changes with their requirements, like if you if you were in nursing and one of their sciences you didn't do well in your senior year, they could rescind your admission. But most of the time, you submit basically, all of these programs are sort of like a debate, right? You submit all of your arguments for why you should be there. And then they decide like, yes, you're good enough. And then once you're admitted into the program, usually, there's not a reason to rescind it unless something drastic has happened, like you've had some sort of disciplinary issue at school or your grades have just not done well. And there are times when you apply to these types of programs that they will admit you conditionally. Like if your grades are semi this, or you're going to retake the SAT and try to do better, they will admit you conditionally based on certain things, and you fulfill those requirements.
Yeah. I think, for parents, it's helpful to have that idea that you have that confidence. They're excited about a career path. They're excited about a major. There is opportunities for additional scholarships. My daughter chose a career path and a major, and because of that, she's getting an extra $1,000 a year because she knew her major, and she's that. Funny enough, she's in year 2, and she's like, not sure I love this major anymore. Love my cohort, and I would say those are the neat things those colleges do. Those cohort love the cohort. Not sure this is the perfect match for me anyways, but that $1,000 is going to make me take a little bit more time before I'm going to switch career paths or switch majors or see if I can major minor and switch that around. So yeah, it's important. If someone is coming in, finishes up with their IB program, they're carrying in all kinds of units, is that when you say, well, try a gap year? Not necessarily just a discipleship training school where it's more faith-based. Those are great too, but is it that when you kind of look into those gap year programs, or you encourage them to do more of those career assessments? Or
well, I think career assessment, whether you take a gap year or not, is really good, because whether you take a gap year or not, you still need to know what direction you're going to be headed, right? And in a lot of ways, if you do that in advance, then that might even help supplement what you're doing for your gap year. But for me, a lot of misperceptions are around gap year. Like students hear gap year and they're like, yes, video games for a year. And that's not really a gap year. That's just a waste of time. And so, a gap year really
That's continuing your adolescence.
yeah, that's called a hobby.
Prolonging it. Yeah.
Yeah. But really a gap year from an academic and adult standpoint is defined as something that contributes academically to your growth, or to your like spiritual formation. And so, whether that means you're working to save up for money, for college, whether that means you're shadowing somebody or you're doing an internship for a year, whether you're doing, an actual gap year program, some of which have, college credit with it, some of which don't. The point of the gap year is some sort of growth. And that's what you should be able to show is that you have grown, you have strategically and intentionally done something over this past year to better yourself. And that's really the key thing. And to me, like it is a gap year because you're taking a gap between high school and college, but it really should be called like the strategic year.
Yeah.
Because that should be the purpose of it. And there's no
Professional
downside. Yes, there should be no downside to the gap year. I mean, universities have no problems with gap years. What they do have a problem with is you just taking a gap year because you need a break and then you sit at home.
Yeah.
That's
and
not going to help
those
you.
that do that then are not preparing themselves for the rigor of college, and so then they come back into college and they are just really struggling. Yeah,
They forget how to study.
They forget how to study and write
Well,
papers.
there's just a lot of momentum that can be lost if you're not strategic about your gap year. And I mean, even if you just take a couple online classes so that you don't lose your momentum and you don't lose your skill, there's nothing wrong with that. And I mean, there are a lot of kids that come in with a lot of IB and a lot of credit. And I think that that's fantastic. And if you can do that, then I 100% cheer you on to do that.
Yeah.
But don't waste that hard work that you've had and toss it, under a bridge because, you don't want to do something. Take that time to be intentional and to really use it. I mean, you as a student have waited your whole life to be independent and out of the house, right? Like this is your moment. And so take that moment and step up to the plate and act like an adult and make adult decisions and say, I'm going to be strategic and I'm going to be intentional in a time that I'll never have again.
So let me ask you a slide question here. So we talk about gap year. I have mixed feelings sometimes about community college. I love it and I don't like it at the same time, but how does community college in the US, that kind of pre-college experience, how does that fit into a gap year? And are those good options for those who are wanting to stay academically involved but not ready to pay for college when they don't know what they're doing? Will that help discern a career path for them?
It could. And I mean, I'm a huge fan of community college, actually, especially for TCKs, because I feel like it does two things. It helps really bridge well. There used to be a stigma about community college, but now like it is one of the most affordable things. And I will say, if you're looking at any sort of pre-professional degree, use community college to get all your prereqs done, which is like the classes before you start like organic chemistry and nursing 101 and that kind of thing, because you're going to be paying a boatload of money. And so pay boatload on the classes that really matter and transfer back into that 4-year degree program, and then do your prereqs at a community college. But, if you have a student that perhaps could have some issues transitioning back into the US, maybe the dorm situation is not the best for them. And it's not for everybody, right? But that may not be
Although
for them.
some of our TCKs have been living in the dorm for the last 4 to 8 years of their life.
Right. And so they may not want to do that, and that's valid. But if that's not, if you're not looking for that collegiate community and or that's
just dealing with the adjustment back to your passport
if that's
culture
not what
and you're worried about it.
Yeah, if that's not what you've dreamed of, then community college is a great option because you really can just live with your family, go to school, save a lot of money, because you're not paying for dorm, you're not paying for meals. You really are just paying for your classes. And a lot of community college and most TCK families, their Pell Grant will cover most of that cost. Your class cost. And so, most community colleges are on the smaller side. So your class size would be good. Your advisors would be good. So, I mean, I think if you're not sure, or you really just need some time to transition, those are good options for students.
I found that missionary families, especially with their traditionally lower income, their community colleges for their kids are almost fully paid for, including books,
Yeah.
including gas and transportation. Some of them have told me I'm actually getting paid to go to school a little bit. I'm coming out ahead each semester, and they're working part time, so then they're able to
Hmm.
save up for
Yeah.
the college. So it's great in that aspect. I will say my only downside, and I still encourage so many people, community college route is a great option, even if you know what your career path is and you can't afford college. It's better than graduating with massive debt. So save your money in the community college pathway first. A lot of them are even connected with major universities, and all
Hmm.
those automatically transfer. You don't have to worry about the transfer credits. um, I will say that sometimes they have in the community colleges, the professors in the classroom environment can be a little discouraging, especially if you're trying to do the academic rigor. Some in the community college, both the professors and many of the students attending, it's almost it's not the great experience sometimes. And so if they're excited about doing something, sometimes those college experiences in the community college, it doesn't reflect well on what traditional college would be
Yeah.
like. Is that
Well, you
fair?
get what you pay for, like if
Yeah.
you want an advisor that is really tuned into you, you need to go to a medium to small sized private university where every professor is geared towards intentionality.
Hmm.
If you need a break and just need to go to class quietly and be left alone, community college might be it for you.
That's right. Or if you like doing the online version, community colleges, if you're going to do something online,
Yeah.
it's all just
There's
about
not a
optional.
lot of community colleges that are faith-based, and that's also, a downside. But
Yeah.
I think, one of the things that I talk to families about so much is, and I know we're going to cover finances a little bit, and finances are really important, right? Like we
Yes.
make most of our decisions based on finance, but the community within the schools that you're looking at, to me, matters more than the money. Because if your student
Absolutely.
is not happy there, if
Hmm.
they aren't a good fit there, they won't stay. And then you've wasted thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And, you've got to look at places that actually your student will fit at and that they will steward and care for your student well. And that doesn't matter whether they're going 5 miles down the road or 500,000. I mean, it
Yeah.
just, that's just the
Yeah.
bottom line.
My, sorry, my nephew is a freshman in college this year. And when they were looking at colleges, my brother kept saying to him, like, what's the community like? Do these seem like the people you want to hang out with, like in the community in general? And he kept saying, Dad, that's not important. Like, I want to play my sport. It's the team, right? And so he's like, he liked the team, he liked the coach.
His community.
But now that he's in his freshman year, he's kind of like, oh, I should have paid more attention to the whole community aspect.
Yeah.
So
And
Sports.
he's
I
very
have
much regretting it.
Yeah, and I have students that will go like, I love the team of that school, but I don't like the community of that school. And then they get injured and they're stuck with the community at the school and they're
Mhm.
not on the team. And then what do you do?
Yeah.
So it's a both and
Mm.
decision. And I tell, especially for TCK families, like no matter what organization you're with, most do not just throw you out there and leave you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like you enter the country, there's someone that helps you with your paperwork. There's someone that helps you go to this grocery store for this. This is how you turn your power bill on. This is how you tell your cell phone on. And, there's a community that help you transition over the course of several years, not just your first 6 weeks, right? Like there's language, there's all these things that
Mhm.
undergird your success. But yet from a parental perspective, we're like, well, they're going back to the States or to Europe. We'll just throw them in there and they'll be fine.
Yeah.
They speak English. It'll be great. They visited a handful of times over their lifetime. Well, you can't expect them to do well when you're not checking that the community that was set in place for you and your transition is not in set place for them for their transition. And that includes a whole host of questions. Is there counseling? How many of them are free?
Mhm.
Is there a TCK community? Whether they want to participate in that or not, that really matters.
Yeah. And even
Who
not
is their
TCK, it
contact
could be
person?
international student.
Yeah, international student community. Is there, what is their residential Christmas policy? A lot of schools like completely closed down at Christmas. Well, if you don't have the money to fly them home, where are they going? How
Yeah.
far is grandma? Those are all parts of those questions.
Yeah.
Most TCKs don't have a car. So is there a shuttle to Target? Like,
Yeah.
you know, those
Yeah.
are all parts of what I would label as community that really matter. Can they walk to church? Like, I didn't have a car in college, but I could walk to church. And that really mattered because I didn't know enough people to just go bum a ride from. I did my second year.
Yeah. But the
But,
first
you know,
semester
community really
especially.
matters. And
Mm.
you're exactly right, Cheryl. Like, retention is a big part of that. And that's why you hear schools talk about fit, because they really don't want you there if it's, or they shouldn't, if you're not a good fit, because you're not going to stay. And that's not successful, right? Like, they
Yeah.
want what's best for your student and what's best for your family.
Ideally, at the end of the day, most schools though are a business and they are looking to drive their bottom line, and that usually means enrollment, and that just means they'll bring you in without the scholarships. But finances are a huge interest to people. Everybody's trying to figure out how to pay for college. Even right now, there's uncertainty whether college will be paid for, if
Yeah.
loans will be forgiven, and things of that nature. Financial aid process. I just want to get out on this front end. Those of you guys who are watching this recorded or live, Kristi has already said there's too much to cover, so she's offering to do on October 20th a special seminar just focused on finances and paying for college and things like that. So we'll give you the link for that here in a little bit. But Kristi, what's the difference between European colleges and U.S. colleges and cost and things like that? We're just going to fly through some high level stuff on finances.
I mean, US universities by and large are astronomically more expensive and more time. You know, most universities in the US are 4 years. In the UK, they're 3 years, and they're significantly less. The caveat is many of them don't have dorms, and you really are just kind of thrown out there to find your own place. So like Liverpool Hope is a Christian institution in Liverpool, United Kingdom, and they're participating in the virtual college fair. Their fees are under £10,000 and they have dorms. So
That's with the dorm?
that's without the dorm.
Oh, okay.
I think it's like 12 or 13 pounds total, maybe.
Yeah.
So 12 or 13,000 pounds total, maybe.
Yeah.
So
For a
consider
year or
that
semester.
for a year. So consider
Good
that
night.
versus like 40,000 per year.
Yes.
LCC in Lithuania, you know, similar kind of thing, and they have dorms. So, you know, if your student is not sold on the US, and you know, you're not really sold on debt. I know like there are some of those like Liverpool Hope, you can apply and use some of your FAFSA information with them. Like they have an agreement where you can, you know, work with them on different things. And so, you know, ask those questions if you're considering an overseas university, because a lot of them do have the ability to honor some of your FAFSA pieces, and the same is true in Canada. So
now I'm going to stop you there. You just used the F word, but you didn't tell us what the F word was.
yes. So October 1st, so a few days ago, if you're watching, is when the FAFSA, the free application for financial student aid, opened. And that's for US citizens or permanent residents. If you have paid taxes into the US, you can fill out a very complicated form that basically the government establishes what kind of aid you're eligible for according to your tax income. And most TCK families qualify for a lot of Pell Grant money. Most of them qualify for the max, which can be in the like 6,500 range. Some even qualify for the supplemental, and the universities decide on that. But it doesn't just tell you what Pell Grant you're eligible for, which is money you don't have to pay back. It also tells you what student loans you might qualify for and what federal work study you might qualify for, which is really important because that doubles your work study opportunities at universities, right? Because universities have federal work study, which is funded by the government, and universities have university work study, which is funded by the university departments. And so if you qualify for federal work study, you have double the opportunities.
Yeah.
So those are really important things.
And we're talking about grants and all of that stuff. FAFSA is a pain to fill out, but I will say just recently it's become a little bit easier though because of the
Yeah.
electronic piece, right? You want to
Yep, you
explain
can
that?
file it electronically. And in the next, I think it's in another year or so, they'll make some other changes which are supposed to make it even easier. You just use previous tax documents, so just gather all those together. They do require some documentation and taxes if your student has worked, but most TCKs, they've not worked overseas and so don't have any tax forms. But it's all stuff that you already have or should have from your tax filing, and then you have to fill it out every year. And that's
right.
because they are assuming that your financial position isn't going to ever change, right? They assume that your financial position is going to change, that you have other kids, and the more kids you have in college, that impacts, you know, your grant status. status and all
And
that.
is it true that the closer you file your FAFSA to October 1st, the more money you get?
I think that's really a myth. I've never encountered a student that didn't qualify, but I do think that, you know, the longer you wait, like if you're in the April thing, that, you know, there are downsides to that. And the biggest one is that universities take that piece of information and they take, you know, that's what they use to determine your financial need. And so they can't issue you a financial aid packet that's really a complete packet in February, March-ish, when universities release that, if you don't have that information. And you can't argue for more financial aid if you haven't turned that in.
Yeah. I will say most every college, both public and private, basically require you to, in the states, to fill out the FAFSA form. I will say that at least for us this last time around, it was much easier because we filed electronically. And when we called it up, it actually imported most of our numbers onto the FAFSA for us. I was like, oh my Lord. We did like a little happy dance.
Yeah.
What took several hours to do, I think we only spent like half an hour or so just tweaking some numbers, and we were hating and dreading filling it out. We'd heard for decades of students I'd worked with before that it's a terrible experience. It's not quite as bad as it used to be. I'm not saying it's a
It's
fun, you're
not.
gonna like woo happy hour or something, but
Yeah.
it's not too bad.
Well, it is work and it is worthwhile. A lot of schools do require it. And if you know for sure you're going to apply to, like, say 3 schools, then go ahead and select those schools to receive your FAFSA. So just go ahead and send it to them. And that just helps them know your interest. All universities are gauging interest. And then I'll also say, you know, related to that, that universities really do appreciate that kind of transparency. And whether you know, feel like you are eligible for any aid or not, like, doesn't really matter how much money you make. That's just part of it. If you have any questions about like overseas income or listing your assets, I've got some great webinars on that with financial planners that do this every day. And if you're one of those families that has a very complicated FAFSA, like, you know, you own a house in the States, grandmother also this, you have this asset, you have this overseas income, you know, I've got a fantastic financial planner that works with overseas families and can go line by line to help you, because those things actually do matter. And you don't want to list your assets incorrectly or your overseas income incorrectly and then, you know, be dinged basically, and you don't have as much eligibility as you could. So don't be afraid to ask those questions, because those are unique to you and to our type of families.
And Kristi, that financial aid planner though is not a free resource.
It is not. She is paid, but you know, if it
you
means
usually end up getting your money back with some of those people.
you do,
If your
I was gonna
finances
say,
are even somewhat complicated, they can usually help you figure out how to reallocate. So, which is the next question I think people need to be aware of. Unfortunately, most of the time, people who are listening to seminars like this are parents with seniors in high school heading off to college. When should they begin that thought planning for finances?
I think your freshman year, you know,
Freshman year of college, right? That's what
freshman
you mean.
year of high school. You know, like just
And
start
all the
thinking
senior
about
parents just like got deflated because they realized they should have started this 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, you really need to start that freshman year. And I would say, you know, junior year, especially, have that conversation about what you feel like you can contribute. Like, there is no greater gift you can give to your kids than transparency and expectation. And I've got, there's a software program, we can put it in the show note links, that I work with, that basically you can, for free, you can assess 3 schools and what, you know, mostly it'll forecast what you would pay by the school. Now, it doesn't include like TCK scholarships and those kinds of specific, but just published scholarships that the universities have. It'll basically assess what you're looking at. And I think, you know, just start with that and then go back and go, okay, you're interested in these 3 schools. This is what it's going to cost us. So the student understands, like, I have to work for $10,000 worth of scholarship, or I need to look at community college. Like, help them get there. And what I love about this software is it even tells you, like, if you took out a loan, and I know most TCK families are not, but if you took out a loan for, say, $1,000, this is how much your loan amount would be every month.
Uh-huh.
And it also tells you, like if you're going to be an engineer, this is the average salary of an engineer from, say, Stanford.
Mhm.
So then your student can see if I'm making, I mean, this is not realistic, but if I'm making $500 a month and my loan amount is $50 a month and my rent is $300 a month, what does that leave me?
Yeah. How
And you can
how
actually have an educated conversation about expenses.
I will say, Kristi, and I didn't use the specific one you've used, but we had a different financial aid planner work with us through it, and it was crazy how close they were. And we were fortunate; someone warned us we should start working on this earlier, so we started working on our junior year, which was helpful because for us there was some things that my parents had put in our name for their purposes that we needed to like kind of move around. I'm like, oh my gosh, and so it was good. But if we hadn't cleared those off our taxes our junior year, then we would have got dinged for it. So we opened up more opportunities for financial aid because of that. And they really did. They pretty much nailed about what we expected. And sure enough, each college, it was pretty close to the financial aid
It
packages
is.
and everything that came in the FAFSA, the grants and stuff. It was pretty close, which made it less scary for me as a parent applying to colleges going, how are we ever going to, I look at the big, $40,000 or whatever. How are we ever going to pay for that? Well, all of a sudden these private colleges, which seemed more expensive, most of those private colleges were almost exactly the same as the state
Mhm.
schools, the
Or
in-state
cheaper.
tuition, or cheaper because
Yeah.
of the scholarships and automatic
Yeah.
grants and things. So, um, I would just encourage parents to one, take advantage of these resources. They are really good.
Yeah.
It changes your mind. You get sticker shock when you're looking at how much you're being asked to pay, but then the reality is, but
Yeah.
second thing, and I like it, you said that, I want to reiterate it, Kristi, have those hard conversations with your kids and say, hey, this is what our family is able to help with, and maybe your contribution is like, we will help with your books, and maybe that's all you can do as a family, but just to have those conversations and being open and honest. And also another part, well, for us and our kids, we had a conversations like, we have a very strict thought on how much college debt we're willing to allow you to take on,
Hmm.
and we will not co-sign for loans above this much because we don't want you to graduate and be in debt for the rest of your life and not have opportunities that you otherwise would. And so we had some of those conversations early on. It was good. It was hard conversations that we needed to have, but as both of them are heading to college, I feel like we're in a good spot, and it's helping to guide some of the choices we're making. So
And I really love what you said about a max of loans. Like I grew up in a family where we didn't do loans, but I do feel like I see a lot of families that have a student that, loves this school. They have a $5,000 gap and they're like, that's it. We're not doing that. And
yeah,
I'm like, a $5,000 loan is nothing, actually. Like if it's the difference between your student succeeding at that school and doing really well because that's their best fit,
yeah,
take out the $5,000 loan. And if this isn't always a guaranteed, but if they're like gregarious and they're a leader, which most TCKs are, and they'd make a great RA, they live in the dorm, the next year they're an RA and that $5,000 goes away.
yeah,
Or $2,000 of it goes away because of upperclassmen scholarship. I mean, there's
yeah,
so much room. Like your finances can't, don't let $5,000 make your entire decision. When that's the best option for your student.
yeah.
Like, yes, you need to have that conversation absolutely about a max for loans. And ideally, you don't want any at all, but there
Right.
aren't silver bullets anymore. And we'll talk about that more on the 20th. Like,
Yeah,
what are all these terms and how do we manage all this? And because my philosophy very much is, many streams equal one river.
that's, I
And
love it.
we'll talk about how that looks and just different, concentric circles that make up for success for that. And, it is formidable. The whole process is, right? You're talking
Mhm.
about so much money, but ultimately you're talking about your student who you have invested in for 18 years.
Yeah,
And part of that good stewardship is passing them along with utmost transparency about where you are and where they need to be
yeah,
financially.
yeah.
I love it.
Get those FAFSAs turned in, folks, if your kids are heading to college, though. While I do think you don't have to be right on October 1st, well, you're definitely not going to do it because it's October 5th today, but
Yeah.
I do think it's before Christmas.
Before
Usually you need
Christmas.
to
Yeah.
aim it. Sometimes you can't finish it. You feel like, well, I don't know my numbers. We haven't finished the year. FAFSA is okay with you guessing your numbers, and then you estimate what you think it is. Usually you have a pretty good guess at this point where you're going to end the year. Put those numbers in, and then they'll let you switch those numbers later if you realize, oh, suddenly my business made a ton more money than I was expecting, or some major gift came in, or vice versa, your income dropped significantly for some reason. You can adjust those later, but it's better to get those in early, and then adjust later.
Yes, and Lisa's right. You can use, last year's number for your FAFSA, whatever is best for you. And I will say, the software that gives you 3 like forecasts of what it would be, it uses some of that information, and you can see like what you might be eligible for with your Pell Grant. And usually it's spot on.
Yeah.
So it's not just, this is how much scholarship I would get from this school, but it really helps you assess. So like, even if you have a sophomore or a junior, you can go in and put in your information from last year and see what you would be eligible for, see what your student would be eligible for in terms of grades and potential test scores, like just kind of guess, and you can play around. None of it's reported, so you can just play around with it, but it does really help you to see, what kind of money are we actually talking about here?
Yeah. And we're excited, our family, because next year we'll have 2 in college. So now
It'll
that's
really
a great
help.
thing. That sounds terrible on one hand, but on the flip side, we're actually probably going to qualify for a significant amount more of grant and things of that nature. Hey, we are running out of time. We have that next. I'm going to drop this, and maybe Cheryl, you can drop this into our Facebook Live group, can watch that as well. That's a link to register for the seminar that Kristi's going to do on the 20th. It's only going to be on finances and going through that. That will also be recorded and available later. Is that right? But if you want to come, and she's going to do a presentation, and then probably you guys will have opportunity to ask tons of questions. You can get even your specific, well, my grandpa said that he'd be able to, all of that stuff, and bring those questions in. We do have time for a little bit of questions. If you guys have any particular ones right now, if you're on Zoom here with us, you can throw that into the Q&A or in the chat. If you're on Facebook Live, you want to write a question in there too. Kristi's getting ready for any questions you might have, getting her not Arnold Palmer drink in there. I don't see any coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and ask one more quick question to you that we didn't get a time to get through on my list. Just quickly, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see families making in regards to finances?
I really think just not having that conversation. And one of the things that, I really love about the software is that it takes out this mystery.
And you say the software, that's the MyCap, MyCap?
The MyCap, and you can do 3 for free. And, I think, especially like for my family, like we didn't know what we would qualify for, how much it was going to cost, would Kristi get any scholarships? These are all very valid questions. And how much are we actually talking about? And I think, whether you end up doing something like that or not, I think just having that conversation, you don't have to do any fancy software. You just have to look at your budget and go, son, we can only contribute $500 a year. Or we don't have anything to contribute.
Yeah.
And, that's an important conversation, because everything about life is expectation, right? You can't let your student go through high school with an expectation that you're going to contribute something or nothing, or, and I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I see, is that, you get into Christmas of your senior year and it's like, okay, we're going to have this conversation. Like Christmas of your senior year, your financial aid packet's coming out.
Yeah.
They've applied to colleges that you'll never be able to afford.
Yeah.
And, you can have a reach school. There's nothing wrong with that, but help them understand from an expectation perspective. And then I think also the biggest mistake I see from students is just their lack of ability to really see how a little bit of work goes a long way. And Lisa's heard me talk about this so much, but scholarships really are like a job. And there's no other time in our life where we can work for 30 minutes and get $2,000. And so you have to pitch to your student, like, the ROI is pretty good, my dear, because I won't speak at a church for an hour and get this much money.
Yep.
I mean, realistically. So, essays and applications here, there, even if it took you an hour, and you got $2,000. I mean, we don't make that kind of money quantifiably in our adult lives. And so helping them understand and then setting good boundaries, like I will only work on this 30 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Set a timer. And when it goes off, hold to that timer because you will get burned out.
Yeah.
And that's a mistake that I see that's so common. It's like, I've got to slave 10 hours on scholarships and it's terrible. And it is terrible, but pace yourself and know that, like in Spanish, we say, vale la pena, like it's worth it. I mean, do the work because you're never going to get that much return for that kind of time. And you won't be doing it probably in the spring because most of those scholarship deadlines are in, November, December, and just have a goal like this month, man, hammer it in and get your applications in, get your scholarships in, and do it before Thanksgiving, please.
Piece
Love
of advice
yourself.
I give to parents, I say for that first semester senior year is really turning in college applications and applying for scholarships. And if they have a job that they're trying to manage or juggle or some other things, I would encourage you as a parent to say this is a time where, yes, it's nice to have that extra income that might help pay for college, but your better opportunity for paying in college is spending time doing good applications, good scholarship, going through finding all the ones you can get and doing that. And it just also takes a burden off of them. That first semester senior year can be really hard and heavy for them. And so try and, as a parent, speak into them, have them back off of those unnecessary or extra things that they can maybe do without. So.
And I mean, don't underestimate the power of $1,000 and $2,000. I mean, if you have a $5,000 gap and you applied for 5 $2,000 scholarships and you got, 3 of them, that covers that.
Yeah.
If you got all of them, that covers your room and board for most universities. What?
Yeah.
I mean, that's insane.
Yep. Agreed. Lisa's saying that the summer between your junior and senior year is hectic time. That is applications coming in and stuff. We really pushed our son to get a lot of his application work done before he started the school year, got into his senior year classes and stuff. So good stuff. Kristi, thank you so much. Fantastic to have you on. Thank you, our friends who have joined us as well. Just as a reminder, we do have some upcoming things on TCK Live in a couple of weeks. We have, I can't talk and do things.
We have Karen Roble coming.
Karen Roble's coming, but before that, we have our TCA.
That's right.
On the 19th, talking about standards for TCK care in organizations. I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be a game changer in how organizations do care for their kids. We have our Faith on the Move book, of course, and all of that and more can be found on our webpage, interactionintl.org. Thank you, Kristi. KC360.co is your webpage. So find her there. All kinds of fantastic resources and free. Great way to connect with colleges. Virtual college fairs happening right now. Kristi, give a shout out about that real quick.
Happening right now. It's a completely free event. You just register as a member, and then on Friday, as in like 2 days, we'll have a time that you can get an invite to just talk to university admissions officers. So no matter your grade, if you have questions, they're going to be there to answer. Whoever registers, though, gets all of their contact information for you to follow up. But it's just great to hear. It's pre-recorded, so it doesn't matter what time zone you're in. Yeah. You can listen to any university there's almost 30 of them, and all of them are like super TCK friendly and amazing.
Love it.
Very cool.
Well, thank you, Kristi, and a special thanks to our sponsors who are making this available.
Praise Gathering imprint from Fred Buck Publishing. Yep.
Very good. Thank you, friends, for joining us. We'll hope to see you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.